When we're talking about the potential causes of autism, I just want to say that I don't know the exact cause of autism. I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know the exact cause of autism. But from what we do know, to my knowledge, the biggest thing that contributes to the development of autism is genetics. I have three causes today, and that's number one. But genetics, guys, autism runs in families. It runs in families, so that is the biggest contributor to autism spectrum disorder. Let me give you all an example here. So let's say I'm talking to a patient, right? Let me paint the scenario for you. I'm talking to a patient and we're doing a psychiatric evaluation, which, by the way, guys, that's the most important appointment with your psych. I say it all the time, and the way I was taught at the great Augusta University, I was taught that if you mess up with the psychiatric evaluation, you screwed up. You can screw up with a follow-up appointment, but don't mess up the psychiatric evaluation, because that's where you initially look to come up with a diagnosis. So, come here, baby. Come here, baby. Come here, baby. Come here. Come here. She's a spoiled brat. You don't want to mess up the psychiatric evaluation, because that's where you come up with the diagnosis, right? So, if I'm doing a psychiatric evaluation on somebody and I just have a feeling that the person has autism, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I would ask anyway. There's a section in every psychiatric evaluation called family history, where you ask about any family history of mental illnesses. And it's kind of a trick question, guys, because who knows the full psychiatric history of their family? I don't know it. You know, I'm from Ghana, West Africa, so I don't know what people in my family had. Now, I know stories of, my mom would tell me stories about certain people in the village. Some people were hearing voices. Some people thought that they were talking to spirits. But we don't have any information about the autistic homies or the ADHD homies. We don't have that information, so we just kind of guess. But some people do know that, oh, my father has schizophrenia. Like, some people have that information, right? So if I'm talking to somebody and I'm doing a psychiatric evaluation and they say, oh yeah, I have 2 older siblings who have autism. My dad has autism. My grandfather has autism. Then you're going to start to think, there's a chance that this person could be autistic. You have to start thinking that this is a potential diagnosis. And even if you don't officially diagnose the person with autism, which you wouldn't do during a psychiatric evaluation, you could at least screen for it. And a lot of times that screening is pretty damn near accurate. But when you screen for it and you're convinced that a person has autism, you're more than likely find out that it runs in their family. That's what you'll find out. So genetics is the biggest contributor to autism. So what does that mean? If genetics is the biggest contributor, that means that you probably cannot change whether you have autism or not. Like I make the joke at the comedy clubs where I say, my girl's autistic, and when she finds out, she's gonna be pissed. You know, the people love that joke. And let's say I marry my girl, which is a plan, you know, and we have kids, and you know, nobody wants to have, you know, kids that have a whole bunch of mental conditions, right? I have ADHD. I know how difficult it's been for me. So if I could choose to not have a kid that, you know, doesn't have any mental conditions, I'll take that. But if my child comes with ADHD and autism, I'm gonna embrace my kid and do the best I can, you know. But ideally, you'd like for your kids to have it better than, you know, how you had it, because I know how difficult ADHD has made my life. So I wouldn't want, you know, my child to have anything. But if you have a child who's neurodivergent, and you are neurodivergent, and your old lady's neurodivergent, you cannot be surprised, because it's genetics, right? You cannot change your genetics. You can't change that. So because the number one potential cause of autism is genetics, that means that I think at some point we should divert our attention away from thinking about what causes autism, like what's the big cause of it, to how can we better support individuals who have autism. And I think that that's a silver lining with this current discussion that we're having. Because some people are trying to turn this into a political issue. Guys, we're not here to turn this into a political issue. In my comment section, you know, we have Republicans and Democrats kissing. Like, we like each other over here. So I don't want to turn it into a political thing, but the fact that more people are talking about autism gives us a chance to shed a spotlight on the condition and start to think about ways that we can make the world better for autistic individuals. I think that's a silver lining here. So this is a net positive, in my opinion, and I don't think this is a reason to tear down the president You know, whoever the commander in chief is, I'm going to respect whoever's in office. But I think this is a key chance to really shed a light on the condition, and begin the process of figuring out ways to help out autistic individuals. If I had a family member who was in dire need of a psychiatric provider, would I go with a psychiatric nurse practitioner or would I go with a psychiatrist? And I told her that even though I'm a nurse practitioner, I would go to a psychiatrist because a lot of the education that some of my fellow psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners have is not sufficient. And I love this profession more than anything. I've done my best to uphold it, but it doesn't mean that we're less than psychiatrists. It just means that we have to just continue educating ourselves. And Dr. Lindsay Hill has a boot camp where she educates psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners. And I just want to plug that in because if we as providers get better at diagnosing things, then we'll be able to look at somebody and say, oh, that person has ADHD. Like what we're talking about tonight. This is what we're talking about tonight. Somebody comes in and they say, oh, my grandfather was autistic, my aunt had autism, my dad has autism, my son has autism, and they have all the symptoms. You're going to be better at diagnosing because you went to a boot camp, because you got the proper help. So as providers, we should be educating ourselves constantly. That would be the main thing I'm looking at if we're talking about what leads to the development of autism, genetics. If both of your parents have autism and you come to the clinic, you have a strong sense of justice. You hate it when people switch up things at the last second. You're hypersensitive to a lot of things. You struggle with sensory overload. You take things literally. You get offended because you didn't understand that somebody was saying something that wasn't necessarily a joke. If you communicate differently from other people and you've always felt like an outsider, if you feel like you have to recharge after brief social interactions, if both of your parents have autism and one of your grandparents has autism and your child has autism and you struggle with all of these things based off of what we know about genetics and how you present in the clinic, there's a good chance that we should be looking at a potential diagnosis of autism for you. So that's what I'm saying. So that's the most important thing. That's what we should be focusing on. I've seen evidence that suggests that prenatal exposure to medications like Depakote, there's a link between that and autism. Now, how strong of a link? I don't think it's that strong, but there is a link. All right? And we've seen this with Depakote. The thing I'll say about Depakote, and the other name for Depakote is valproic acid, is if you're pregnant, you wouldn't be taking Depakote anyways. Depakote is one of those medications that if you're a lady and you're trying to get pregnant, I'm talking about people, because sometimes you can get pregnant and you don't know that you're pregnant. That's fine. Like, that happens every day. There's no shame in that. But if you're a lady and you're trying to get pregnant, okay? So it means that we're raw dogging it. Like, we're trying to get pregnant. You should talk to your psych and let your psych know that you're taking certain medications. I mean, your psych would know, but if it's a new doctor provider, let them know, hey, I'm taking Depakote. You have to let them know about Depakote. Let them know about lithium. And the issue with Depakote, the reason why you would never be taking Depakote during pregnancy anyways is because if you're taking Depakote in the first trimester, there's a link between that and neural tube defects. So there is no world in which a pregnant woman, a woman who knows that she's pregnant, would be taking Depakote. You just wouldn't do it. You would come off the medication, and then we would find other ways to better control your mood. So I don't really worry about Depakote during pregnancy causing autism because you wouldn't be taking Depakote no way, right? It's not a medication that you should be taking, especially in the first trimester. Maternal obesity, there's a link between that and autism. And look, none of these are as significant as genetics, so just keep in mind that genetics is the main thing. Parental age. I've seen some studies suggesting that when you have kids and you're much older, there's a link between that and autism, especially for men. So if you're a guy and you're having a child and you're 50, 55, 60, 65, as fellas, as long as everything works down there, like we can still sling it, we can still have kids. So if you're an older parent, I've seen some studies that suggest that advanced parental age, there's a link between that and autism. maternal obesity, trauma during pregnancy. For example, hypoxia, not getting enough oxygen. I've seen a link between that and the development of autism. So these are other potential, contributing factors. I don't want to say causes. I think I put causes on the title of this video. I don't like that. I don't like that title, but that's what I wrote. I like contributing factors. I think that's a better title.